Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to note that we have 11 members present physically, and one member, Bill Drake, is calling in remotely. So everyone aware, in the last meeting, we aligned BET policy with Connecticut law that allows members, if they have a good reason, to be able to call in remotely. Okay, I'd like to go to item 2, requests for budget adjustments. Nisha? Routine applications.
The first is HD2 from the Health Department. This is $122,582. It's the approval to use some Public Act grant funds. The next is NW1 from the Nathaniel Witherall, $110,000 additional appropriation for a tray line. And ED5, $400,000 from the Board of Ed. And this is an additional appropriation for Parkway School, a well at Parkway School.
Okay. Do you have a motion? I'll second. That's my
I'll make the motion, yeah.
Okay. Nisha Rohr, second Dan Ozesmir, to move those. Any objections to approving those with unanimous consent? Okay. Those pass 12-0-0. Okay, non-routine applications, item 3. First one is SE2, First Selectman, $90,000 settlement. Settlement Tobin versus Town of Greenwich. Leslie?
Yes. The Budget Committee met on this item. We discussed it in executive session. However, we did not come out and actually make a vote on this one.
Karen?
Yes, the Law Committee considered this also an executive session, and subsequent to our meeting, prior to our meeting, the RTM Claims Committee had met and approved settlement. And then subsequent to our meeting and the Budget Committee meeting, the Board of Selectmen, I understand, met yesterday and approved settlement. And the settlement amount is, am I allowed to say it now?
Yeah.
$90,000. This case involved a woman who was walking along a sidewalk, and to avoid some people, it was during basically the end of COVID, around COVID time, to avoid people coming in her pathway, she walked into the street and tripped over the remnants of either a stop sign or a yield sign or one of the signs that was protruding from the roadway, causing significant damage, fractured body parts. As I said, all of these committees prior to, all of these boards and commissions prior to us voted to settle at the $90,000 mark, and before us is a vote to settle for that amount as well.
So you're making that motion, Karen?
I am. I'm moving the settlement in the matter of Tobin versus Town of Greenwich for $90,000.
Motion by Karen, seconded by Stephen Selbst. Discussion? Jeff?
As I spoke at greater length on a prior occasion and won't do again now, I will be voting against this settlement. It's not the amount of the settlement amount, which I think is relatively modest, given that the plaintiff claims approximately $110,000 worth of special damages. It's the case on liability that she was not walking in the sidewalk. She was passing out into the street and tripped over this obstruction. But I don't think the town has the obligation to make everywhere that she may walk safe for her to walk as if it's the sidewalk. She left the sidewalk. She chose to leave the sidewalk. And to me, that's a fatal flaw in her case, and I won't vote in favor of this settlement.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would just, remark that, it's very unfortunate that somebody did get hurt. It's not unreasonable that somebody would step off of a sidewalk and walk on the street if they feel that there are people coming. And for that reason, I'm voting in favor for it.
Thank you. I suppose we have a no vote. Are there any other noes besides Jeff? Are there any other abstentions besides Jeff? Okay, sorry, yeah, apologies, yes, you're correct. So can we pass that 11-1-0? Okay, fine,
Yeah, do a roll call. Yeah.
thank you, yep, we'll do a roll call. Okay, we'll do a roll call.
Harry?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Dan?
Yes,
Leslie Tarkington?
Yes.
Leslie Moriarty?
Yes.
Jeff Raymer? A lonely no. Bill Drake?
Bill is a yes.
Miriam Cruiser?
Yes.
Steven Selbst?
Yes.
It's 11-1-0.
thank you all for the correction. That passes 11-1-0. Jeff Raymer, no. The next item is PW2, Public Works, $338,000 additional appropriation. Leslie?
I'm in a good presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, this is a request for appropriation for the planning and design for the Greenwich and Stanford multi-use path project, which was previously treated at a last month's Budget Committee meeting as a first read, and no vote was taken at that prior meeting. Mr. Michael and Ms. McGeechee appeared to give a detailed explanation of how the town of Greenwich and the city of Stamford were working together by submitting a joint application to the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, the DEEP, under the 2023 Connecticut Recreational Trails Grant Program to plan and design a multi-use path connecting the two municipalities, Greenwich and Stamford. The application was successfully awarded up to $270,400 from Connecticut Deep, which would cover up to 80% of the estimated $338,000 planning design costs. The remaining 20%, or $67,600 of the estimated costs, would come in the form of local contributions from the town of Greenwich, which would be 73%, and the city of Stamford, which would be 27%. There was substantial discussion on the structure of this, where Greenwich is standing and funding the full amount of the 80% to be reimbursed by the state. And the document, the MOU, at that point was in a draft form that had been received by the Budget Committee only 2 minutes prior to the beginning of that meeting. So the Budget Committee wanted assurances that there was the memorandum of understanding holding the city of Stamford to the agreed-upon documents. The vote on this was 301 with one abstaining, and to approve the acceptance of the grant and appropriate the $338,000 for the path and design project, with a condition that the BET reviews and approves the final interim municipal agreement between the town of Greenwich and the city of Stamford.
Okay. I think that, Leslie, you made that motion,
I made the motion, yes.
and is there a second?
I'll second.
Is that, oh, yes, yeah, I just want to
Okay,
make sure we
sorry.
have a motion. So it's Leslie Tarkington, seconded by Leslie Moriarty, and now Karen with the Law Committee.
Sure. The Law Committee met numerous times on this, the most recent tonight prior to this meeting. There are basically 4 points that I'd like to point out. The indemnification on the DEP agreement, unfortunately, is what it is. The state has consistently come back and said that they don't negotiate the indemnification portions of that agreement. And we do have insurance that will cover it, so we can't change it, and that's what it is. I want to commend the Law Department, and I also want to commend our our Department of Public Works, also for negotiating with Stanford and getting what they could out of them. I know sometimes it's like getting blood out of a stone, but they did a yeoman's job in trying to get the changes we asked for. We did try to get Stanford to give their fair share, which they basically said, no, it's, a project that's mostly for our side of the aisle, if you will. So they will not front the money up front, but they will be reimbursing us for what we're out of pocket. There is a new paragraph in the DEEP agreement that I would like to bring to your attention. It deals with data privacy language. It's in paragraph 29 of the DEEP agreement. And it references section 42-515 to 25. But when we took a look at the language tonight, and Steve was very astute in seeing it right away, section 42-517A1 exempts the town from the data privacy obligations, which are non-trivial. So although they added language, it seems as though the AG didn't really read the law because we're not subject to it. The intermunicipal agreement also had one addition in the design phase. On page 2 of the agreement, the the second paragraph from the bottom, there was an addition saying any task amendment, change order, or similar increase in the cost of work above $338,000 shall be apportioned between the parties based on the impacted mileage of the route in the respective municipalities if applicable. So any costs above $338 will be borne by the party who benefited from the change. And this was asked for by the city of Stamford. It's the only thing that they asked for. All other changes were from Greenwich. The only other question that came up was how are we funding this? And this is going to be coming up out of the capital non-recurring. So we approved the agreement and the intermunicipal agreement and the DEP agreement 200.
Thank you. Karen, do you have a motion at all? Melissa, or do you want an amendment? Did you have a condition? Okay.
Our caucus met, and we are proposing 2 conditions to the release of the funds. The first is conditioning the release.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Leslie Tarkington seconds.
Okay. The first is the release of $93,740, which is task A and C in Appendix A of the DEP agreement. It's conditioned subject to the receipt of executed agreements between the town of Greenwich and DEP and upon an executed agreement between the town of Greenwich and the city of Stamford. So again, this is to assure that we have signed agreements in our hands before any work begins. The second subject to release is the remaining $244,260 would be subject to release upon completions of phases A and C and a report to the BET of the results of at least one public hearing with Sound Beach and Shore Road neighborhood input. And that
Thank you.
O is an errant O.
Okay.
Before we
Any-
start discussion, can I ask that we consider these conditions separately as opposed to as together?
That's Karen?
Yeah, that's fine. The first one we can call A and the second one B.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Leslie?
Yes,
Okay.
I
Okay.
already did
Okay.
that
Perfect.
myself.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have discussion on condition A.
I don't think there's any controversy, at least for me, on condition A, so maybe no discussion be needed.
So when we say executed agreement, are we talking about the intermunicipal agreement?
I believe it's both agreements. If you receipt of executed between the town of Greenwich and DEP, that's the first one. And then the executed agreement between the town of Greenwich and city of Stamford, the intermunicipal agreement, yes.
So I think maybe we should specify
We can
that.
specify the whole, yeah, I mean.
Because I think
both
we're pretty close, pending what legislative and rules and the RTM may suggest, but I
Sure.
think these have been signed off by Corporation Council of Stamford, and I think Laura McGeechee's comfortable with the language, so.
Yeah, I can add intermunicipal agreement concerning Greenwich Stamford multi-use path to the end of it.
Okay. Okay. Leslie
I-
Moriarty and then Leslie
I
talking.
had one more question.
Oh, so,
So is this an automatic release, or does this require, once the agreements are executed, it's automatic, or does it need to come back to the BET? I'm not clear from the language.
Karen?
My understanding would be an automatic release once we receive, somebody confirms that it's been received. So-
Leslie? Are you okay with an automatic release? Okay.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, maybe we could just specify, or for clarity.
It'll say, to an automatic, no. Where would that be put?
Subject to confirmation by the, confirmation to the controller?
Or subject to release from the law department, or subject to,
Confirmation by the law department to the controller upon the receipt?
Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate it. I think you understand the substance. It's just, they don't need to come back to the BET through our various,
That's my understanding.
yeah.
Yes,
So
okay.
once confirmation is received from the appropriate people, the money is released.
So, release of $93,740, Task A and C, Appendix A of the DEP agreement, conditioned, and this should be conditioned, not conditioned, conditioned subject to to confirmation by the law department to the controller of the receipt of executed agreements between the town of Greenwich and DEP, and upon executed agreement between the town of Greenwich and city of Stamford vis-à-vis the intermunicipal agreement.
I'll agree to the substance. I'll let you work on
All right, I'll work on the language.
Okay. Leslie Moriarty?
So I know I asked for these to be done separately. I noticed that the two different conditions which have been identified add to 338. But just looking at A, which is, we're talking about the legal agreements, I want to confirm that I remember during the Budget Committee, we talked about a little bit of which comes first. So to sign the grant, we have to sign the grant with the state first before Stamford will sign the intermunicipal legal agreement. Let me just ask, is that the order in which the documents are going to be signed? Right, we have to sign the grant with the state first, apply to the state under Greenwich, and then after we submit our grant application or approve the grant request, then Stamford will sign the agreement with us. Is that the order of documents? Can, okay. I just didn't want, I want to make sure that this condition is consistent with what we're expecting to do. We're also, just in general, we have a grant amount of 338, of which the majority of it is reimbursed by the state, right? So the town of Greenwich will be signing checks in greater amounts than $93,000 and waiting for a reimbursement. So this condition is only upon what our ultimate out-of-pocket is. I think the parties agree on what's intended here, that we don't have to, I don't really have to worry about the dollar amount, but in theory, they will have access, they being DPW will have access to more funds than just $93,000 upon RTM approval.
Well, my understanding is that the grant application, correct me if I'm wrong, the grant application would be approved for the 338, okay, so that, all the documentation can be signed. But we also need to appropriate sums, right? Because we're getting reimbursed after, and Stamford and the state are going to give us cash after. The intent of this is to provide the $93,000 appropriation so that the DPW can go ahead and do their surveys, do the environmental work, and have the funds for public hearings so that the community can see what's intended. Once there's public hearings, then the then the rest of it would be released so they can do the detailed design work, which would then fill up all the 338,000, and then they would go to construction after. That's
So
I believe that's the intent of those two
Okay,
conditions.
so I separated them because I wanted to be able to talk about to me, a condition on having executed documents, which makes sense to me. The second condition, which is being introduced tonight, which is to release the funds to DPW in two portions. One is to just do some preliminary work, and you determined it was a certain percentage of this to be able to talk to the community before the entire amount is released.
Yeah, the amounts were defined based upon the two categories, Task A, and then Task C had 16,000 funds for public presentations hearing. So that's how those numbers were derived at. We didn't,
Do you have knowledge that that's the order in which our Public Works Department would approach this project? That they would have Task A and Task C prior to Task B? Do they have enough information to do meetings and
I think we could, I
public
mean,
outreach?
they're here, we could ask them. I mean, just so you know, the thinking was Task A was the surveys, okay? Task B is the detailed design work, and then Task C is the engagement with the community. It is the feeling, certainly of this caucus, that it would be good to do the preliminary survey work, get some information together, engage with the community to see if that's something that they want, and then go ahead with the detailed design work. And again, people can have different views of that, and that's fair enough, but that's the clear intent of this
So the
motion.
question I'd like to ask the department, if
Of course.
if you're in agreement, Task B also talks about conceptual preliminary design. So will there be enough information about a design to be able to talk to the community with something substantive?
Okay, Jim Michaels from DPW.
Thank you. That's what we were just talking about in the back of the room there, was that there is some conceptual preliminary design in Task B that we think is probably going to be necessary. It's going to be a little tight to probably get to a full ability to say this is exactly where it's going, what's going to be there, and everything under that, just that 90,000. So I don't know what that number would be exactly without breaking it up, but, and then the other question I had that, maybe a technical piece, we'd be looking to go into a contract with a consultant for this service. In order for us to sign the contract, if there's condition on it, we won't be able to sign for the full project. Is that correct? Even though we,
You could break it into phases, actually.
okay.
Wait, can we
hold on.
nail that one down? What Jim is asking? I'm not sure we're,
So I guess what you're being proposed is that you would go out with an RFP for the full project, of which there would be Phase 1, which would be a guaranteed payment, and a Phase 2 of the remainder amount, which is at our option only of exercising. Typically, those cost a little bit more to have that option, but I don't know the experience in this particular kind of project.
But, and also just to kind of add to that question, I would imagine that, although this might be, kind of written a little more explicitly, I would imagine in this project that if you spend 3 to 4 months on it, and the sense was this isn't really in the end going to go anywhere, and that there really wasn't strong support, I would imagine even away from this conversation at the board, at the BT, that DPW or the advocates or the neighbors at some point might decide halfway through to say, look, this doesn't make sense, or this isn't going to, right? I mean, that was
Yeah,
always a
there's
possibility.
There's definitely projects that we get started on
Yeah,
and we
right.
don't get to the finish line on, because we realize that it's not something either is constructible or is something that's desired by the community. So we try to get into these projects and, spend what we need to get certain stages and get to that phase of the public input. The other thing that I'm a little hesitant on the exact numbers is these are based on rough estimations. We haven't gone out for RFP, we haven't gotten a consultant on board to give us prices of what they feel the different phases of the project are. They're based on that, so in the event we go to a consultant and the consultant says that the survey, that the stuff that's under task A in this is 98,000 rather than 92,000 or whatever the number is, then our hands are a little bit tied there, so.
Thank you, Jim. Here's my proposal. Again, these, and you're right, the numbers may end up being a little bit differently, but we're working off the numbers that are in the presentation that came from the documentation with DEEP. I know that the BET meeting is December 11th, and the RTM meeting is December 11th as well, clearly the same night. However, if in the intervening time you come back and say it's not 93, it's 110 or whatever that is, I mean, we can have some kind of sensible conversation and potentially, put some modification on it if we need to. I mean, certainly we'll have another BET Budget Committee meeting and a full BET on December 11th when the RTM would be approving this anyway. But I think the intent of this is just to make sure there's a process to get some public comment, and then we move on to detailed design. Okay? Jeff?
So I have a slightly different question. Maybe it's a question almost more for the law department. If we conditioned $244,000, it's conditioned upon, so the question is, if you condition a chunk of it, have you actually approved the agreement? Because the state is reimbursing 80% on an expectation of an approved agreement. If you have a condition on 244,000 and change, you hold some public comment and the like, you get negative comment, public comment, and you decide not to go forward with the project. In the state's view, aren't they saying you didn't actually approve the contract? That 2/3 of it was approved only conditionally, and the condition was never satisfied, so we're not going to reimburse, we, the state, are not going to reimburse the 80% of the $93,740 that you appropriated and spent. And right now, so the town then ends up having spent the $94,000 roughly. We were only planning to be spending about $40,000, I thought, when we got all done with the reimbursements. Sorry, 67,000, thank you for the math. I don't know how we got there. We got there by imposing a condition on the release of funds. And I think that might be a mistake.
That could be, but I also say that would also be an issue if we had no conditions and ultimately in 3 months it was determined that not to go ahead with the project for other reasons, right? That would still be an issue in both scenarios.
No, you have a different result. Because your task B allows for you to hold these public hearings, calls for you to hold these public hearings. But if you approve it all, on the whole $338,000, if you approve it as an appropriation, subject to these agreements, at the end of the day, when you held some of these hearings and you spent most of, but not all of the funds, you are in a mode in which you have a contract with the state that the state is reimbursing 80% of the funds that we incurred, and the state therefore will honor its contract and reimburse. Whereas if you had a condition on a chunk of the contract and you never released the condition, I don't think you actually fulfilled your promise to the state of having a contract with them for the 338. You never approved that.
Jim?
It might be more a question for the law department than for Jim.
It's
sorry,
probably
yeah,
as much
yeah.
a question for the law department, but
Yeah.
it raises another question that I'm thinking about as you brought that up is, if there's a condition on this, can we sign the agreement with the state that says that we're agreeing to a $338,000
Yeah,
project?
you can't.
Yeah.
You'd have to say to them that some of it has been conditioned.
I don't know if we've done it with the grant. Can I?
Yes, Leslie?
So I'm trying to understand what's trying to be accomplished here, and that is to determine whether there is community support for a further design once the initial design is identified. So, and I'm not sure on what basis a BET member is going to decide there's community support or not? What if it's 50-50, right? So, or if it's 75-25, does that mean lack of support? So we're interjecting ourselves in an area where we typically aren't, especially in a design process. I can understand that we do get involved when it comes to the construction funds. That's much bigger money. Design, typically we'll let the process play out and then look at the results as they get into both conceptual design and then more specific design is something to act on. But just setting that aside, I think that we're tying the department's hands in such a way that they're not going to be able to perform the work. I think Jim raised several good points. One is to sign a contract, right? So yes, you're going to sign a contract, one that gives the town the ability to cancel it for no reason, right? So you need to be able to get out of the full commitment, whatever the contract is. It's going to have to be set up with 2 phases, with the option being one way, town-only option of continuing to the final design. And so that kind of contract gives you kind of what you need. But I'm wondering if there's kind of a less onerous methodology that this board could use to work with DPW on this project. Let them proceed, let them get I think you'll need conceptual design to go out to the community. You have nothing to show them on paper other than the words right now, which is a path, and you don't know where it's going to go or the options, et cetera. But maybe they can come back to us with an informational report and, asking for their assessment on whether they go forward or not. I don't know if at the end of the day, you want this board to say, no, this project shouldn't continue into the design phase versus not.
Just to pick up on that, sorry.
Is there anybody else? David. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just to pick up.
Leslie and then David, because she
Just
did
to
have.
pick up on that, I
David?
think that the
David,
intent-
sorry. Leslie actually did
Oh,
have.
sorry.
And then David.
So I have a couple comments now. I do think that if there's any question about this second condition, we need to go back and think and add this additional 244,260 to the first number, because I think the intent is that all of the money would be conditioned prior to the release of any of it, that we want both of those documents executed and in good order. The next point is, just speaking to, I guess it was to Leslie, I think of many sort of highway neighborhood, if we want to talk about Glenville, bridge projects where we receive grants, where we have had conditions. So, maybe deep is a little bit different, but certainly on many of the other the grants that we've received, there have been conditions. So I don't consider this to be unusual. And I think the third thing here is this is a way of getting the word out to the community that this is going to happen within their neighborhood. Normally, this is being done outside of our budget process. Normally, something like this, and we understand there's a grant, and that's great. But normally, something like this would go through the budget process. So in January, there would be a public hearing where residents can come and speak about any projects within the budget, and they certainly do on that point. Likewise, they have another opportunity in March, late March, to come before a BET public hearing. So there is a process that we normally have, which this is not in compliance with, and so I think that some people here are saying, we have heard from a lot of the bicycle advocacy group, but I don't, I think we also think it's important for the community to be aware of what will be happening within their community. So, I support this condition, both conditions.
Thank you. David?
So help me with this, Jim. When we had the project on Glenville and Brookfield, was that the intersection? It was a normal DPW project, and the neighborhood was opposed to it. Am I getting the right intersection?
Brookside.
Brookside. Anyway, so what happened in that case? In that case, we had money appropriated, it was in your budget, you were going to proceed to do it, and then, well, recite for us, what was this, because the RTM wanted not to do it and it was rejected. How did that work?
So we get the design funding through the budget process. We did the design and got to a conceptual design phase. And then, once we went through the public hearing process, that project was then stopped at that point, and any design funding was given back to the town.
Right, so that sounds about right. So,
And we had, it was in a program that we had put in a preliminary application into that would give us indication that we were going to get that money in a grant at a later time, which is under one of our standard transportation grants.
right, so that's similar, if not very similar, if not identical, to what we have here. I think the intent, if I get this right, is to ensure that we have robust engagement from the community before we proceed, to the task B, to the actual design work, which I don't have any problem with. I think that's very well intended and correct. So if we were to put in a condition, I'm just thinking aloud, that said simply that this is subject, we appropriate the 338, subject to task A and task C occurring prior to the release of task B funds. But hang on, I'm just wondering, because in truth, that's exactly what happened on the Glenville project. You had the appropriation, you didn't use it because during the hearing process, the community rebelled. And wouldn't it be pretty much the same in this project? Why would it be any different?
I think the couple differences that I'm not 100% clear on are that in that project, we had the full design funds that we were able to enter into a contract with the consultant on. In addition, I don't know for certain that, like I mentioned before, part of task B is conceptual and preliminary design. So there may be parts of that we may need in order to get to a point where we've gotten all the public hearings put in place as well. So there may be some of those funds that would need to be expended as well. And then with the Glenville Brookside project, the funds that we didn't have yet were construction funding, not design funding. So that's the key differences that I see between those.
And I'll drop it in a second, but if you were to, maybe the 93,000 is not the right number, and we've talked about that, you've addressed that, but it seems to me that the approach here would be to say, let's do the preliminary work, gauge the community, and then, do that, the planning work and the community engagement work first, and then spend the money for the, for the actual design work. And if the community rebels, it's going to be evident, just like it was for Brookside, and it was quite evident. The community spoke out quite loudly, and the project was curtailed. And I think this is identical in my view. Really, it is.
So, real quick, so I think to David's point, my view is, I think based on the information we have, I think that's where we came up with the 93. If by December 11th, and we'll have a budget committee before, and again, the number changes somewhat, I think that's certainly something I think we would all be, very open to. But, the intent is to make sure we have that feedback loop with again, because there's an interim due to the timing of a grant, we're kind of a little outside the normal budget process, public hearings, presentations. So again, that's just my thought. Are there any other? Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I think that I would be happy to vote on this item without a condition, just understanding the process that DPW normally goes through in its outreach, if that is the concern. I will say the creation of the intermunicipal agreement is a positive step forward. I frankly think we're making it too difficult to accept grant money. It's off-cycle. We don't really have control. I mean, they're not going to comply with our budget process necessarily. I think this multi-use path is something that, again, it's new, it's innovative, it's a bridge between two communities, it's highly supported by, the state representatives, the governor, the first selectman. I really would urge people to consider, what's the underlying concern and can it be addressed in other ways? We have liaisons to DPW. We can certainly ask for a report. We already have the agreements, and let's identify what the concerns are and try and be flexible so we can allow them to proceed and also, address the concerns.
I know we have two conditions. There's condition A, and I think there have been some edits to that. Should we do a vote on condition A? Go to condition B? There's a motion.
Before you
Amendment,
vote,
I'm sorry, amendment.
I'm just going to say, I will be voting against these conditions, but in the event that these conditions are not approved, I will submit a condition for consideration, which says, look, the funding of the 338 is subject to task A and C occurring prior to the release of task B, with the amounts to be determined by DPW, whether it's 93 or 98 or 110, they can determine that. That condition I will support in the event that this doesn't approve.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the conversation. I intend to continue to support the condition A as amended and condition B. So we were going to have separate votes? So, Nisha, can we do a roll call on
Can I-
condition A?
Can you
as-
repeat
Yeah, I'm sorry.
the motion,
Can I,
please?
yeah, I'll just, as we were sitting here, release of $93,740, tasks, in parentheses, tasks A and C, Appendix A of the DEP agreement, conditions subject to confirmation by the Law Department to the Town of Greenwich Comptroller of the receipt of executed agreements between the Town of Greenwich and Connecticut DEP, and upon an executed intermunicipal agreement concerning Greenwich-Stamford multi-use path between the Town of Greenwich and City of Stamford.
Jeff?
So I thought we said that the 93,000 was going to be amended to be the full 338,000. You would want, I would think, all of the funds conditioned upon there being signed agreements. I don't see the problem with that. And that takes care of the problem of whether or not you have to go back and change the 93,000 if the second agreement is not, if the second
Good point.
amendment
Karen, are
is
you
not
okay with that?
approved.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jeff.
And I will support that also.
Okay.
I think I seconded it.
Okay. So, Nisha, can you call the roll?
Okay. All right, so this is the amended motion.
Motion A.
Now I'm really confused. I mean, because basically, this is an automatic release of the full amount once the agreements are executed. Is that the intent? I don't think that's your intent. So let's nail this down.
Yeah,
No, I mean, this is just a condition, excuse me for speaking without being called upon. May I speak, Chair?
Right.
This is just a condition that all of the funds are conditioned upon a signed agreement. We're going to vote in a moment on the second condition, and the second condition
You wouldn't be
exists
listing,
separately.
so condition A would not have a dollar amount associated with it.
No, it's, actually, you don't have to express it. You can just say that the approval is conditioned upon. If you could have no dollar amount, but if you're going to have a dollar amount, it needs to be the whole amount.
Okay.
Isn't that understood, that we won't have use of the money until the agreement is
No,
executed?
no, what's
I mean,
happening
Isn't that
here-
normal operating procedure?
No, you're appropriating $338,000. If it wasn't conditioned to the signed agreement, the Public Works Department would be free to start spending $338,000.
But we
And in
know they
fact-
wouldn't.
Pardon?
We know they wouldn't do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't mind there not being any condition, but this, but the.
But in this
one
case, though,
caucus
we
is-
do have another, it's not everything within our control. We have another city that we're dealing with that we're fronting for. I think this situation's a little bit different than what we normally have. Okay. So we're going to remove the amount from condition A.
Can I don't, yeah, I don't think that, I just want to say, I don't think that's the intent. I think, if we remove the amount, I don't think there's any purpose of the condition, because like Laura is saying, obviously you need executed agreements to release. I think the purpose of structuring it in two conditions is just to emphasize there's two tranches. The first tranche will be released in the 93,000, which will cover task A and task C, which will allow feasibility to be done and public opinion to be heard. And I think that's kind of what David is saying as well. But, he's saying maybe not put a dollar number on it. And then the second tranche is released to do
So I
the full
think the way we
construction.
handled this for there were 4 conditions on the Affordable Housing Trust. I think the way we handled it was the second 244,000. I think that's how we handled it there, because we had 4 conditions, 3 that applied to all the monies, and 1 condition that applied to the last tranche.
The difference here is that you're beginning to dictate the sequence by which Public Works is going to do the work, and there's components of various tasks which apply to other tasks as well. So you're beginning to create a structure which interferes with the ability of Public Works to do the work in the way that they think is the right way to do the work. And frankly, I don't think we have their expertise. I mean, I think it's a perfectly all right thing to have a condition that we're appropriating the funds, but you're not free to spend the funds until we have fully signed agreements. And I never expected, of course, that Jim would start the work until the contract is signed, but nevertheless, it's been proposed by your caucus, and I think it's a right proposal. No, the technicality here is don't go spending any of this money until we have fully signed agreements from both the state and Stamford. And so that's what you're saying in the first, and I'm happy to support that. I won't be supporting the second.
Miriam?
I have to say, I'm starting to get very confused by this. If we don't put conditions on this amount, and we get the grant as we expect to, what's our downside? What's the dollar amount of our downside?
For the total amount?
Yeah.
I believe it's, was it 67,000? No, I mean, obviously, assuming that we get the reimbursement
We
and
get
that
full
Stanford gives us the
reimbursements.
monies, yeah.
So the true amount that's on the line, if the town does not want to go forward with this, if it has the same fate as Brookside, is 67,000. So we're solving these 2 conditions for $67,000, is that right?
I mean, you can take that perspective. However, I think this is more than just a money question. Again, to me, we're acting on this right now because there's a grant and we should. But again, realistically, if there was a project that was coming in front of the community, there would be, in a normal budget cycle, there would be a first selectman public hearing. And ultimately, before we then appropriated, there would be a BET public hearing. And people may come in and say, this is the greatest thing in the world, in which case that's fine. But we haven't had that here. So we are approving funds, and again, the BET's first role is not to decide if a project should be proposed or should be pursued, but ultimately, we do listen to the public. We do hear about things they prioritize. So to me, all this is intended to do is to have enough funds so that there can be an outreach to the community about what this project will be. And then once that's happened, then we would release the rest, and they go to detailed design, and then they go forward.
But, so I guess that's the point of my question. So our downside is $67,000 for this to get to the community and not be accepted, because we're not going to spend the $4 million on actually doing this project. So we'll have the opportunity to get from community feedback. So our downside is $67,000 in order to receive the grant without conditions, without issues with the state, and trusting the department to do its process as it should, which is, as point B says, go to the community. So is that I mean, that's the
Well,
way I,
to me, it's
that's
also a
the
question
way
of
I
a
look at
timing
it. We're
when
not
the-
going to spend $4 million if the community
No, understood,
doesn't
but
want
it's
it.
also a question of when the timing of that. Usually when we would appropriate funds, we would have seen a project be put in the budget such that if the community had an opinion, we would hear it twice before we appropriate it. Here's a situation where what we're being asked to do is to appropriate the full amount that includes detailed design without any of that in front of us. So again, look, I mean, I think reasonable people can disagree on this. I think we're all trying to get to this, a similar place, but, so I think we should probably just, if we don't mind, can we call the question?
Can I?
Okay,
can
not
I-
call the question, but can we?
So I'll just put a final point in it. The reason I'm not going to support it is because I think it's going to be very hard to get real community feedback without having a design, because we know how the community, you know, there's just going to be things thrown out, and it's never going to get support, because they can't say exactly in detail what neighborhood it really goes through and what's the size. And so I think it needs the detail to get real community support or lack of support. And I think it's worth the potential downside of $67,000 to do so. Thank you.
Leslie, and then can we go to a vote?
I think we need a short caucus first. I'm getting questions from my members. These conditions were just given to us right now, and we don't quite understand the flow and the impact on the project. So can we get a 10-minute caucus, please?
Yes. Okay, just so everyone's aware, we're going to have a 10-minute caucus. Thank you.
It's red.
Can we go?
Okay, everybody, thank you for bearing with us. There was a request by our colleagues to go into caucus, and we have both caucused, and we are ready to take up again PW2 Public Works multi-use path. There was a discussion about some conditions. Karen, can you update us on where your discussions are?
Well, my understanding is that, actually, why don't you give the report from your caucus first? Or Leslie?
So the report is that we understand what our colleagues are trying to do in the sense of making sure that the community is on board with the approach that was developed from preliminary design work with the community before moving forward, and to make sure that that is publicly available via a report to the BET. But the proposal in front of us, we thought that that did not provide enough funds to DPW to get that preliminary and conceptual design work. So in looking at the state grant numbers, to the dollars amount for task A and C, we added 30% of task B, which is equivalent to about what we estimate is needed to get to MI approval for P and Z, which is 30% of the design funds. So that amount of money is, they need $167,000 to get to that point, to be able to have a report on the community reaction to the proposal. So to have that reflected in the conditions and to make it a more simple condition to the public, we think an alternate condition, just have one, which is to condition $171,000 upon signed agreements with the language that Karen had indicated of law department confirming to the controller. And then the language of your proposed second part, so it'd be a condition on $171,000 upon signed documents and a report to the BET of the results of
can I-
at least one public hearing in Sound Beach.
Okay, can I guess I'm not really, okay, I thought that when Jeff was speaking, he was saying that we are releasing funds, but we're conditioning 171,000. Is that the concept? Because we're appropriating 338 per the contract, but yet we're only conditioning 171,000 or whatever it is, 171,000, subject to the completion of the planning and public outreach components and a report to the BET. So I would think that our condition should read, release of funds is conditioned subject to confirmation, and then the rest of the language by the law department to the town of Greenwich controller of the receipt of the two executed agreements, and also subject to the release of 171,000 for the completion of the planning and public outreach components and a report to the BET.
Yes, that does the same thing, yep.
Okay. So if that's acceptable to everybody, then I think we should go with that.
Okay,
Okay.
that has my support. Misha?
Okay, so who, is that Karen? Are you making the motion and then?
Yeah.
Same.
Karen with Leslie Talkington is a
Is that
second.
okay?
Okay.
Okay, Harry,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Dan?
Yes.
Leslie Tarkington?
Yes.
Leslie Moriarty?
Yes.
Jeff Framer? Yes. Bill? Miriam?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
12-0-0.
Okay, and Bill Drake?
You said yes.
Yes, okay, that passes
12-0.
12-0-0. Thank you. Okay, now we have PW2 item as amended. I think we've had a significant discussion here. Can we call the vote on the item? Okay. Well,
That was the condition.
No.
are there any objections to approving this as amended?
With the condition.
With the condition, yes. Bill? There's no, I mean, no, you're a yes. There's no objections to accept approving this.
I'm a yes.
Okay.
Can he identify himself when he speaks?
Yeah, that's, who are you, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, Bill. Okay, perfect.
It's required for FOIA.
Yeah. Okay, so that passes 12-0-0. Thanks, everyone, for their patience. Next item, SE3, Law Department, indemnification of the DEP contract for the multi-use path. Karen?
Yeah, the Law Committee reviewed this. I was also informed by our wonderful Budget Director, Roland, that the amount of 338 is not needed because we are indemnifying, it's basically just an indemnifying, we're indemnifying the state, and there is no dollar amount associated with it. So the indemnification portion of it is spelled out in the contract, and we don't have any option. The state does not negotiate on that. We will be insuring the project for the indemnification portion of it, and so there is no dollar amount that we're approving.
Second?
Second.
Leslie Tarkington. Motion by Karen Fassos, seconded by Leslie Tarkington. Thank you.
So do you want the Budget Committee report?
Yes.
Okay. So the Budget Committee report, to receive the aforementioned grant funds, the town is required to enter into a personal service agreement with the Connecticut DEP, which covers the terms and conditions of the grant administration. The PSA requires indemnification and insurance to the state of Connecticut for the project. As has been the practice to date established for similar indemnification and insurance, this requirements of the requirements to the state of Connecticut, the town obtains insurance for the first dollar coverage to the self-insurance retention amount in place at the time of the agreement, and that amount is, self-insurance amount is currently $3 million. So that is going to be purchased, and I believe it's being purchased, paid for by the Public Works Department. That's what we were told in the Budget Committee. And so that motion voted in support, 4-0-0 to approve and acquire the indemnification insurance.
Any objections to approving this with unanimous consent? Okay, that passes 12-0-0. Thank you. Next item is ED4, Board of Education, $2,197,499, additional appropriation for special ed.
So
Leslie?
I move that,
Okay?
move this.
I'll second it.
So moved by me.
Unless anybody else want?
I'll second.
Okay.
So-
Leslie Tarkington, seconded by Leslie Moriarty.
Okay, so, so the report from the Budget Committee. It was reported that changes in the state of Connecticut law expanding services and an increase in the total special education and student support student population have placed additional budget requirements on Greenwich Public Schools. Dr. Hallingenthaler and Mr. Leviton gave the committee a detailed explanation by account supporting the additional appropriation request. Mr. Leviton responded that with these additional costs, there will be an increase in special education excess cost grant reimbursements. Mr. Geiger told the committee that a portion of this request, and the request was larger at the time of the Budget Committee, there was a section that would be a reimbursement of fringe employee benefits that are done through transfers, and so therefore, that didn't require approval or an appropriation, and therefore this amount was reduced to the amount that we're seeing before us this evening, an appropriation request for $2,197,499 upon, and the committee voted 4-0-0 to appropriate the $2,197,499. $1,499.
Thank you. Discussion? Jeff?
It's a small point. I was really going to raise it at the end, but it seems to me we're at the end, if nobody has any other remarks. On the second bullet point in the memorandum from the BOE, is a reference there to the handling of the legal fees on the federal court litigation, which is pending. Let me just touch a couple of things. In our budget, the way it exists for the current year, we budget $1.1 million for outside counsel, which means litigation in which outside counsel is hired to represent the town. We also budget $240,000. That's the fees of our town attorney, which in a sense is an outside counsel, but it's a category different than the $1.1 million for outside counsel litigation. In the school's budget, we budget $250,000 for the current year, if my recollection is correct. That's intended for legal advice to the school board and to the school's administration on various things that come up across the year. The second bullet point addresses the following points to you. The town recently notified Greenwich Public Schools that it will charge the Board of Education 50% of the attorney's fees, those are the fees for Shipman and Goodwin, if legal representation in court involves special education law. All town departments and the BOE are responsible for external legal consulting services, but not for external legal counsel or representation in court. And then dropping to the end, they've already incurred $86,000 on these fees with that 50% allocation. In rough numbers, if you project that to the end of the year, we're talking about $200,000. The item that you're being asked to approve, the component, if I'm reading it correctly, for this particular item is $43,005, which would be the amount that they need at this point. Here's my problem. I don't think, I'll say it more strongly, actually. I object to the concept that two departments or two elements of the town have an ability to make changes in the budget that we've approved to them. Right now, the budget that we've approved calls for $1.1 million being spent on outside counsel. If over the course of the year that's not enough to cover the fees that we incur to outside counsel, then the town attorney is able to come back to us for supplemental appropriations. And in fact, we've already had the experience of them coming back for supplemental appropriations because the fees were becoming excessive. The qualification that was offered in dialogue before the Budget Committee was that, well, this is something that they've agreed to between the two departments. Frankly, I don't care if there was an agreement. The departments don't have the jurisdiction to pass budget items back and forth between them. Parenthetically, I'll say that Mr. Leviton, when that remark was made, commented, I assume correctly, that, well, technically, there actually wasn't an agreement. We were just plain told that there's fees that are not going to be covered. Again, I don't care if that's correct or incorrect. I don't think two departments have the ability to pass burdens back and forth. Another qualification that was offered that, well, this is federal court litigation, which sometimes can become more complex. But we have certainly lots of federal court litigation. Our EPA litigation at the Department of Public Works on environmental issues are issues that are pending at a federal court jurisdiction. Our CHRO, or Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities litigation, is under the jurisdiction of federal courts. We deal with that on behalf of various departments, schools for some, but certainly other departments as well. I don't think that's an appropriate qualification. I'll vote in favor of this item, including voting in favor of the $43,000, because I don't want there to be unpaid bills out there. And Mr. Leviton did comment before the Budget Committee that there's already becoming some objection being relayed back from Shipman and Goodwin, they're becoming a little concerned about the pendency of unpaid bills and the slow payment being made of them. I hope, Mr. Levitan, I've quoted you correctly on these things. Do take an opportunity to correct me at the end of my remarks if I've said any of it wrong, because I don't want to be saying wrong things here. But I think that these fees need to be paid. They need to be paid out of the $1.1 million. If those funds are not sufficient, then the town attorney needs to be coming back for supplemental funds. It is not the province of the town attorney to announce that they're going to be changing the way the budget is handled to provide that only half of it is going to be paid out of the budget allotments and the other half has to be paid by the separate department involved in this case. None of that is appropriate, and I find that objectionable. But I'm not going to fail to vote against these items because of that objection. But I raise that alarm as I think being an inappropriate way of this thing is being handled, and I raise it as a departing member of the BET. Be cautious of what is going to happen going forward. This is just plain wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I do intend to support this item, but I do have a few comments. I think first, with regards to Jeff's comments, I do agree that ultimately it is the BET's burden to decide where, ultimately with the advice of all the departments, where items should be budgeted, whether it's town legal or it's the Board of Ed. And I think that is something, I agree with Jeff, that does need to be, taken up in the next budget cycle and clearly defined. To me, however, in this case, the way I think about it is that although town legal takes on the vast majority of expenses on the legal side, in a situation where the administration has to make a decision, do we provide a service, do we agree to a settlement? Do we go to court? It's a very complex and I know very difficult decision-making process. And, when I think about legal fees involved in that process, the real question is who's really the one who can make the proper decision for the town and the district on how to approach this. So I do think this is not a discussion for tonight. I think it's something that, as Jeff said, should get worked out in the next budget cycle. But I do think there are some there's some real things to just make sure we get right there in terms of where this is budgeted and how that's done. The second thing I would say is that although I will support this, there's two items that give me a little pause. One I know is that, in the last couple of years, we have had interims on special ed. So to a certain extent, this is not unprecedented. And I think we appreciate here on this board, the difficulty and the concerns, particularly with some of the new, kind of state laws or mandates. In the past, however, most of our interims did occur in the spring when there was more time to see how all the budgets developed. So ultimately, I do intend to support it tonight, but certainly feel that, potentially this could have, been considered a little later in the year when we had more information. I would also note in the discussions at the Budget Committee, I believe there was a question, don't we have, potentially excess funds in another part of the school system to offset this? And I think the answer generally was no. And I think one of the things that was raised in that discussion last week was, this issue with the increase in the amount of short-term subs. I know that, I think that we have about 900 teachers. I think that we've been averaging about 90 short-term subs, and maybe I think a week or two ago on a Friday, there were 120. Away from the budget implications of that, clearly, which we need to better understand, obviously that has a real impact on the education and the outcomes for the kids. So this is, I know it's something, just talking to the administration, I think everyone's concerned about and is working on, but, for me, on a finance board, it's the first time I'd kind of really engaged with that question, and it is definitely concerning, just not from a budget point of view, but otherwise. So those are my comments. Any others? Okay, do you want to go to, Leslie?
Yeah, likewise, I'd just like to make the comments that I I did question the timing of this particular request. I would have preferred for it to come a little bit later in the year, during the budget cycle, perhaps, when we have a time to sit and talk and, address what's happening within the district, where opportunities are to have some funding. I certainly raised the issue of whether it all needed to be funded by the fund balance, whether some of it could have been funded by the other accounts within the Board of Education. I'd really still like to see that volunteered, if at all possible. And, there was discussion about the substitute teachers, and, it raised, concern to me, and so I did look at, the absenteeism of the teachers, just to see in an old cycle what it was, and, per what Dan said, that's as much as 13 or 14% on that Friday, a couple Fridays ago. That to me sounded pretty high, although I believe the average that Blaise said was about 10%. But I look back over time and looking at the 15-16 school year, the teacher absenteeism was about 8.1%. So it's crept up. Likewise, I think, we're seeing student absenteeism at more like 10%, and at the same time, it was more like 3.8%. So obviously, there's a concern about how that's impacting their education and, eventually their performance in school. So that's some I took away. But I'll ask again, is there any chance for any of this to be funded from any of the other accounts and not the full $2.2 million out of the fund balance?
Yes, please.
Is that appropriate for that?
No, not at this time. I would say that the question, just for the public and for the full board from our conversation the other day, there's two things on the timing. The goal here is to do two things. It's not to freeze the overall Board of Education budget for these required services and for the age extension. The timing here, we still have to go to the RTM next month, so we're talking about an implementation, of the funds in mid-December already. And we really, if we wait too long like we did last year, we still had to freeze. What we'll do here is similar to what we did with the interim last year, is keep the district funded we have a lot of outstanding items that we need to pay for special ed, and hopefully not freeze, and then hopefully still do what we did last year, which was return the excess back to the town, over $1 million after the interim. And I think in good faith, we have a good relationship there. And then the second piece is that we are using existing funds to cover the other deficits we talked about, the huge surge in sub expenses that we've seen in recent years, that you express your concerns. We have the same ones here. At our budget committee tomorrow, we actually have an agenda item on the budget to talk about this specific topic as well with the BOE budget committee, and to review the staffing patterns and different items that Dr. Jones has really been running some reports on. And we just to give a few examples, like we have a para over budgeted that we also are using other funds to cover. We transferred some 200s and 300s and other 100s funds to cover the $37,000 for that paraprofessional salary, and we're doing that kind of across the district to balance out a few of the other structural deficits. So we really are making effort to do that right now and try to really pare it down to focus on these items. It's a concern we've heard.
Thank you, Blaise. We have Laura, and then I think Leslie.
Yeah, I just wanted to make two comments. I support this item. I think it's the responsible thing to do. This was identified, this area, as a risk in this year's budget. You've come to us in a timely fashion. As you say, you are already covering other deficits with other accounts, so I think this is responsible. We know these monies need to be spent. On Mr. Raymer's point, I do want to amplify that as well, and perhaps this is something that the Law Committee might desire to take up prior to the budget cycle in February. I think it is a policy decision as much as it is a budgetary decision. And I always worry with some of us rolling off the BET that these things, don't get followed up, so I hope the minutes reflect it as such. So I think this is, as we learned in the Budget Committee, this was a case that was actually won twice, and it's being appealed for a third time, so they're defending themselves against an appeal, and that's really out of their control. So I'll leave it at that.
And I think the board will see over the next several weeks, Laura, me, and Jeff will be assigning all kinds of projects, and Miriam and Bill. So there's be 5 of us. We're coming up with all of these things that we should have, could have done, but we'll make a nice list for you guys for Christmas, okay? And I think Leslie Moriarty.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the point that Laura just made, is when we were reviewing the budget this year, you had already come in for a 1.1 million appropriation or around that time to cover special education. So the BET had warning, knew that your special education was underfunded. It's not that fewer kids were going to come to the district, that more kids are coming to the district. So this is in line with the information that we had before, that we haven't been properly funding this particular line item in the past few budgets.
I just want to take, I want to take exception to what was just said. I think that we're seeing increased litigation, we're seeing increased appeals, and I don't think anybody could really project that as far as that's concerned. So I just think that we need to get a better handle on both, not only the litigation side, but on the operating side for special ed. And I'm hopeful that we'll have those discussions during the budget cycle.
So can you, sorry, David.
So now I have one question. Of interest to me is the net growth of 64 special ed students. And here's a question for you as educators. Any insight as to what's causing that and what that may indicate for the future?
So there's an overall growth of eligibility for special education, both in Greenwich, the state level, and nationally. We're coming in at about 14.6%. The state is at 17%, and Fairfield County is around 18%. So we have a really good MTSS process, which is keeping some students from qualifying. We're intervening early and with enough supports. But the number has been steadily increasing over the last decade. So we do anticipate to continue to see that increase and be more in alignment with the state. I think we'll still be lower because we have some really good processes, but there still is that expectation of growth.
Thank you. Okay, Nisha? Can we call the vote?
Can I just say?
Oh. Yes, Jeff.
So I sat through the Budget Committee meeting, and I listened to Dr. Heilenthaler speaking then, and again tonight, but particularly at the Budget Committee. I had a wonderful impression of how on top of your job you are and how clear your answers are, and you always seem to make sense and things. I just need you to know how appreciative we are, to get such clarity in an area that could have such lack of clarity if somebody was less competent than you. So thank you for being there.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. We're nice here, we don't bite. Okay, Nisha, can you call the,
Yes. Okay, Harry,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
I'm a yes, Dan,
I'm a yes.
Leslie Turkington.
Yes.
Leslie Moriarty,
Yes.
Jeff,
You, Ms. Heilenthaler, I mean, Dr. Heilenthaler, I'm sorry, and I'm voting yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Okay, who are you? Bill, can you identify yourself?
This is Bill. I vote yes.
Thank you, Bill.
Miriam,
Yes.
and Stephen,
Yes.
12-0.
That passes 12-0. Thank you. The next item is ED6, Board of Education, 3.2 million, additional appropriation, Hamilton Avenue HVAC. Leslie Tarkington.
So Mr. Watson told the Budget Committee that the HVAC system at Hamilton Avenue School needs to be replaced. It is currently being supplemented by a temporary unit, the GPS rented under an emergency procurement basis. Facility strongly advises against rebuilding the current thermal system in place and replacing it with a traditional efficient HVAC system. And in this case, the vote was 201, and one member abstained. Later on, we voted on a bond, and I'm not, is that on here? Is that a bonding motion? It is. So at that meeting, there was a discussion about the thermal system, and there was a discussion about whether this should be, there should be a condition on this with a related school issue that was being raised. I think as an alternative to that, the committee did ask that Mr. Watson, I think we asked the schools, and Mr. Watson was the most logical person to do it, give us a memo recommendation on the school's position on geothermal systems, since we're replacing it with a HVAC system, traditional format rather than the geothermal. And Mr. Watson, we did receive from Superintendent Dr. Tony Jones a memo, an email actually, to the members of the BET and to Mr. Geiger, our budget director. And she, with that email, did attach a memo from Dan Watson, and which gave his opinion on the use of geothermal technology to provide heating and cooling in the school's facilities. She further commented that he does not support the installation of geothermal for many reasons, which he listed. I do have a copy of the memo. Would you like me to read it? Sure. So the memo is from it's from Dan Watson, the Director of School Facilities, to Dr. Jones, with a copy to Mr. Leviton. And it reads, Dr. Jones, I have been asked to document my opinion on the use of geothermal technology to provide heating and cooling in our facilities. I do not support the installation of geothermal for the following reasons. 1, as we have learned from the Hamilton Avenue School project, geothermal is a fairly new technology and installations are not a common occurrence at schools. 2, geothermal systems are not easy to properly maintain and operate. In our current staffing configuration and model, we do not have the capacity to provide the oversight and the hands-on needs for a system of this complexity. 3, GPS Facilities does not have the resources to support hiring on-site consultants to maintain and operate the system. 4, GPS Facilities is structured and prefers to work with systems that are more mainstream, yet current with efficiencies, as our staff has more training and knowledge of these systems. 5, GPS has been attempting to implement more standard systems across the district, and GPS has the expertise to maintain those systems. And then summarize. GPS Facilities supports a town-wide initiative to develop a consistent approach to facility management and the integration of newer technologies that have major financial impact. May I add just something? We appreciate the schools being very responsive to our request and doing it in a very expedited manner. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. And you made the motion, Leslie. Do we have a second? Okay, Stephen Selps. So Leslie Tarkington, second Stephen Selps. Discussion. Okay. Leslie.
So I had sent a question in advance of this meeting because there was some information discussed this morning at the Central Middle School Building Committee, and I just wanted to have a complete understanding of the administration's perspective on geothermal, the use of geothermal at Ham Ave. The consultant who was on the CMS Building Committee meeting had reviewed the Farnsworth study about the HAMAV system and came to, their conclusion as working in the industry is that the system would be and could be functional for the use at Hamilton Avenue, and that given the climate benefits, it would be an advantage potentially to further explore that. So I don't know, it may not be fair, you haven't had a lot of time, I don't know how many of you were at that meeting to listen to the comments, but if you had a reaction to some of that information that was shared. You don't agree?
I'll speak for a second so Dan can think. I was not at the meeting. Were you at the meeting? Dan was at the meeting, so I'll give Dan a second to just gather his thoughts on that question. I do want to keep the conversation more focused to the project specifically before us right now, Hamilton Avenue, because we also have a very specific operational need that we emphasized at the Budget Committee as well, that's specific to this project. But I'm not sure who reviewed it. I think it was the company, it's the sales company that we already had look at the system one time, and they couldn't handle the system, and actually is the company that recommended Farnsworth. If it was Brightcore or something along those lines. Yeah, so if it was we did bring Brightcore in to look at the options. We also had been hoping that maybe they would be interested in a PPA at the time. This is last spring when we were doing the budget for the capital budget. They were not. And this system was outside of their wheelhouse based on the condition of it, and they had recommended Farnsworth to do the assessment of it. There's also for us at Hamilton Avenue the very specific operational need. We have a system that's not functioning in a school that has hundreds of kids in it, and we have to get it, up and running. The only time frame we have to do this is by next summer, which means going out to bid. Hopefully, if this goes through the normal process, we still have the RTM in December, and we'll have the item hopefully funded so that we can go out to bid in January and get design and get up and running to have it installed the day school kind of closes, so it's ready to go for the next school year. Did that give you enough time to?
I'm not sure where you want me to go with this, other than my opinion. But let me first say again, for probably the 100th time, I'm not against the technology. Geothermal is a fantastic system. I've been looking at it for 20 years. I first encountered it in a similar role I had in Bridgeport. And at that time, it was voted down, and they went with another type of system called ice storage system. Totally different, modern technology at the time. So I'm not an expert on this by any means. I think it is a good system, assuming that it's designed right, purchased right, installed right, maintained right, and operated right. I can oversee 2 of those items. And I can tell you, the report that came through, and you probably heard that the main reason it failed was operator issues. Probably. But that doesn't take away that it was probably installed correctly. And if you read this Farnsworth report, it alludes to that. It also alludes to the fact that it wasn't designed correctly. So that left us in a world of hurt. You all know, we've been paying thousands of dollars to try to get this system operational just since I've been here. So as far as Hamilton Avenue goes, I am dead set against it. I'm not against the system as a whole. I know for a fact that my current staff does not have the capacity, and that's in understanding the technology and in the amount of manpower. I have 15 buildings, and I can't tell you the tonnage we have in total. I have 2 HVAC mechanics, 2. And that's pretty scary. We do have agreements with HVAC contractors to assist in maintaining things, but on a day-to-day operation, 2. Now we're throwing in another type of system that we obviously had problems with. I just don't think I think we're throwing good money away. The system that we are proposing has not been totally defined yet. When we say traditional or modern or mainstream, it's going to be similar to what we have in one of the other schools, whether we could look at a cooling tower like we have at the high school or at Riverside, or a chiller system like we have, we just installed at the ISD gym. We have the technology, we have the background, we have the understanding of how it works, we understand how to maintain it and operate it. The report also goes on to say they don't recommend repair and replacing it. Well, that's because the units that are left, the components to this system, other than the wells in the field, I'm talking about the pumps, the heat exchangers, everything else that's associated with it has been overtaxed since it was installed. We're supposed to be using this as a heating system. If you don't understand geothermal, we're actually using the heat from the earth to provide a minimal amount of heat for the school. You're not going to get 85-degree temperatures, but you'll keep the building from freezing. We had a secondary boiler system. Because the geothermal system was not functioning correctly, the boiler systems that we have were overtaxed. They were supposed to be a secondary source of heat. They became the primary source. So we're going to have to replace the boilers as well. It's, if we were to go in and put a whole new geothermal system in, there's not a real lot that we could be able to utilize, and whatever we could utilize is 20 years old, or, I'm getting my years wrong, 15 years old. So that's my opinion in a nutshell for Hamilton Avenue.
Okay. Leslie, continue.
So I just want to make one comment. I'm supporting it, but it's kind of ironic that when we're hearing all of this talk about state, the state grants for, construction of schools, that here we are replacing the HVAC system at Hamilton Avenue School, and we're still waiting on, I guess, progress payment and final retainage reimbursements on Hamilton Avenue School from the state. So 15 years later. So while we hear, on the front end, the pressure and whatever, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to bring them to closures. I think probably Blaze nodding his head up and down, can confirm.
Yeah, we're almost there, I think, after a couple decades on this one project. You just did remind me, though, that we are submitting this project, this Hamilton Avenue HVAC project, to the state HVAC grant, hopefully by December 31st. There's some documentation procedures we added to the BOE agenda for tomorrow night. And then hopefully we'll add it to our RTM call list, the resolutions and things that are required for grant. And then hopefully we can, we'll submit for a 20% reimbursement on this project as well.
So that's great news.
Harry.
We're also trying for a project the project that we did at Julian Curtis. We're trying for a retro reimbursement there of 20%.
I just want to remind ourselves that we delayed this on decision day, and any further delay, I think, would be very misguided. We delayed it because at the behest of the Energy Management Advisory Committee. And I think, they asked for another study. We gave them another study. I think it's been well described by Mr. Watson what's in that study. And I think we ought to take a vote on this and move forward. I think it's critical.
Leslie.
I just wanted to follow up on why I asked that question, because you raised some interesting points that we need to match our goals of what we want for the future with our capabilities of our staff and our funding. And I don't think we've always been very good about thinking the whole system through, right? We have projects, and most of our projects have been individual LED lights. That doesn't require a system and a backup. But some of these other advances that we're talking about, be it solar, be it geothermal, whatever else is out there, I think just as a board, as a town, and working together with the departments, we need to figure out how best to support, how best to structure those things so that we can take the most advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I do intend to support this project. I was originally thinking about some conditions, but you'll be all glad to know. Well, maybe I will make a motion on
I
it.
don't know.
Okay, so, okay. I don't recognize that. So, I think a lot of it's been said, but, it's hard for me to think about this question, obviously, without thinking about what's going on at, Central Middle School, which is our, biggest project in town history, which I think we're all excited to see go ahead. When we made the appropriation of the project a couple of weeks ago, the project did not include geothermal. The building committee, in fact, several months ago had decisively voted not to include geothermal. And the reasons are manifest and many, and I think Mr. Watson's described a lot of them, but there were a lot of reasons not to include it. I mean, I would note right now that that conversation is going on again at the building committee, and certainly I do not support the idea of retrading that decision. I don't know that that would come in front of me. I only have several weeks left, but and the reasons, I say that is, and before I give you the reasons, I want to note that I think everybody here wants to move forward with renewable energy. And I think that's clear. Obviously the LED lighting process is going very well. I know the school's moving that. In solar, clearly we're putting solar on the Cove and Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, and the plan is that there will be solar on Central Middle School. These are major projects. But even on those two major projects with solar, we're still dealing with the fact that the legacy, solar arrays that we have at the high school and at Glenville, and I think there might be one other, do not work. And that's, of course, disappointing, but there's lots of reasons for it. But what I would say is on these two big solar projects, the Civic Center and CMS, I think the approach is going to be to look at power purchase agreements. This is truly an industry standard. And why is it so important? Number one is the maintenance is being done by a third party. And number two, not just the maintenance, but their financial incentives. They are putting the money up front, and their financial incentives are not just to do the maintenance, but to make sure these arrays provide energy. Otherwise, their financial model does not work. Okay, so I know the decision versus, whether we're going to build it and own it or we're going to do PPA, that's still not finalized. But my point is, this is, I think, a structure where the incentives are aligned properly, where we can get a win-win for the town. The economics are excellent for everybody, and obviously it has the environmental benefits. For geothermal, at least, my 2 cents, and again, I'm just, for the Central Middle School, I'm just repeating what's been said at the building committee, but it is a much more complicated question, right? One we know is that the system, it's not a question of 1 or 2 panels aren't working and those get replaced. I mean, with geothermal, it's a system as a whole. The next thing is that if we do geothermal, we need to change our decision on whether we use gas or electric in the heating system. There's a lot of things that go into it, a lot of expenses. So, I think I would urge us all to support this proposal. And I think understand that the town is and the school is moving forward on many green projects, but sometimes until we, as Dan said, until we have a real town-wide and school-wide view of something like geothermal, how it's going to work, how it's going to be fit together, it really, in my mind, isn't appropriate for a building committee on its own to be trying to make that decision. There's so much more that goes on with the Board of Ed, the administration, the financial models in terms of how these things have to be evaluated. I think it has to be, in my mind, a town-wide approach and not, building by building. So with that, comments, unless there are any others, I'd like Nisha, if you can call the roll.
Sure. Stephen, I'll start with you this time.
Yes.
Miriam?
Yes?
Bill?
Yes.
Can you say your name, Bill?
This is Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Jeff?
Yeah, this is Jeff, yes.
Not
Leslie
Mike.
Moriarty?
Yes.
Leslie Tarkington?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
I'm a yes. David Weisbrod?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Harry Fisher?
Yes.
12-0-0.
Thank you. That motion, ED6 passes 12-0-0. Thank you, Nisha. Next item, FI 7, Finance, $3.6 million bonding resolution for Parkway Well and Hamilton Avenue HVAC.
Yes, the Budget Committee heard this. Oh, first I'll move that we approve this appropriation.
And I'll second.
Okay, motion by Leslie Tarkington, seconded by Leslie Moriarty.
The Budget Committee heard this, and this was a combined bonding resolution. $400,000 of it was for the $400,000 for the Parkway Well, which we heard in the routine applications, and the other $3.2 million is for the Hamilton Avenue HVAC. So the committee voted 201. Again, one of our members had left, to accept the bonding resolution prepared by Robinson and Cole to finance the Parkway School well for the $400,000 and the Hamilton Avenue School HVAC project for $3,200,000.
I don't see any discussion. Can we approve this with unanimous consent?
Yes.
Wait, before you do that, I'm sorry, something just jumped out of me on section 5. It says the BET authorizes the Board of Education, the chairman of the BET, the treasurer, and the controller in the name and on behalf of the town to apply to the Commissioner of Administrative Services for any and all federal and state grants and aid. Does the Commissioner of Administrative Services have authority over federal grants? Do we know? Do we need to include some language to say, and any other appropriate government agency?
Pete, do you have any?
We could check with Robinson and Cole. They draft these.
Yeah, I mean, I would just check to see if we needed to just
Federal.
add language, any, to apply to the Commissioner of Administrative Services and any other applicable state or federal agency.
Okay.
Can we note in our motion that we are acting on it to include any recommended changes by
Yes.
the council?
Town controller.
And I'm sorry, I just saw that.
No,
It just jumped out
Thank
at
you,
me.
Karen. Okay, is that okay, Pete? Yes. Okay, so can we accept this with unanimous consent? Yep. Okay.
Oh, Bill.
Bill, you have no objections to accepting that with unanimous consent, correct?
No objections.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go forward, can I just, as I was sitting here with the language of the multi-use path, I just revised it a little bit. I just wanted to read it so that everybody is okay with it before I send it off to Pete. It would be release of funds is subject to confirmation by the town attorney to the Town of Greenwich Comptroller of the receipt of executed agreements between the Town of Greenwich and Connecticut DEP, and upon an executed intermunicipal agreement concerning Greenwich Stamford multi-use path between the Town of Greenwich and City of Stamford, Connecticut, of which $171,000 is released for the completion of the planning and at least one public hearing with Sound Beach and Shore Road neighborhood input and a report to the BET.
I think the numbers switched.
Yeah, the numbers switched, so we're withholding 171
Okay.
and releasing 167.
167, okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so I'll send that off to you
Our
guys.
very patient, item 4, Assessors Report, our very patient Laura Elliott.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET, I'd like to present the Assessor's Report for November 2023. First of all, I'd like to introduce the new Assistant Assessor, Ms. Taylor Miniter. She's been employed here at the town of Greenwich since August of 2018. And prior to her employment here, she worked for the cities of Shelton, and she also worked for Quality Data Services. So anyway, I'd like to introduce her, and I think I speak on behalf of the assessor's office. The town of Greenwich is very fortunate to have her.
Thank you and welcome.
For the report, the personal property declarations were due November 1st. Out of the roughly 3,800 accounts we've received to date, roughly 2,127. We granted 116 extensions, which leaves us with roughly about 1,500 non-filers. Again, I'm assuming we will get some additional property declarations filed, but we still have a fair amount of non-filers. Litigation, we had one commercial property withdrawn. There was no tax loss or tax consequence to the town of Greenwich. On the case that has arisen out of the 2015 grand list, we went to trial in July on that, and the briefs were finally filed last week. So hopefully we will hear something from the court on the resolution of that tax appeal. One last item, and this is in the motor vehicle supplemental, which we send out bills for in January. They are sent out with the second half of the real estate bills. The supplemental motor vehicle list has been priced and it's ready to go, so we'll be sending that on to the tax collector. Does anybody have any additional questions for me this evening?
Can I get a motion to accept?
I move that we accept the assessor's report.
Motion by Leslie Tarkenton, second by Jeff Raymer. Any objections to accepting the report? That passes 12-0-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item 5, Treasurer's Report. Town Controller Pete Minarski. Oh, Controller's Report, sorry, 5 and then, yes, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, BET members. I'll start with the Controller's Report, and there was also a request to take up the monthly economic report, which I'll incorporate into the Controller's Report. Basically, the audit is moving along. As opposed to last year, we were trying to get it out much earlier than June 30th, and we don't have the built-in delay with Nathaniel Witherell at this point this year. We are going to go to market in January. The bond sale will be Thursday morning. I believe that's January 25th, 11 and 11:30 for a bond sale of about $40 million and a band sale for about 75 to 85 million. We're still sizing the size of the borrowing. What's unique about this year is that we have a BET falling off with 5 members leaving and a BET coming on with 5 new members. And the credit reviews are right in the middle of the 5 leaving and the 5 coming on. So right now, we've got the credit reviews scheduled for January 3rd. Tentatively, we have an answer from Fred Camillo, First Selectman, and waiting for Ben. And we'll probably invite all 17 of you, being that it's a Zoom meeting.
I assume with the change that our credit rating will now soar.
It should stay the same. Before I go into the economic review, any questions on the Controller's Report?
Can I get a motion to accept the Controller's Report?
I move that we accept the Controller's report.
I'll second.
Leslie Tarkenton, second Leslie Moriarty. Any objections? Nope, that passes. That's accepted with unanimous consent, 12-0-0.
Okay, again, this is still, the monthly report is usually given to you by Roland, but we had a very early Budget Committee meeting, so I passed out, I know that it was sent to you electronically, but it might be easier to you follow if I gave you the report and I'll go along the way it's structured. Conveyance tax, you can see that we're at a little over $3 million. And we're doing better than last year, but we had the 2 great years during the COVID period. So we're trending well with a $5.5 million budget on the conveyance tax. Building permits, actually, if you look over the 7-year period, it's the highest for the first 4 months of the year. I haven't analyzed it to see if there's any very large building permits in there, but that's a good news, again, on the top three. The best news of the three is the interest income at $3,475,000. We did increase the budget from $1 million to $6 million, but we still expect to exceed that by millions of dollars. So I will move to the revenue comparison, and I will draw your attention to the difference or variance column on the right, and I will go through the variances, and I will pick out only the large ones and try to explain the good news or bad news. Moving down on in the 130 finance, you can see, as reported, the interest income is 2.5 above last year. Good news, and it is reported on the first page. Moving down further, the largest variances are on the tax collectors' collections. They add up to a slightly over $6 million. However, the levy from last year to this year went up slightly over $9 million, and we've collected 56% of the levy. So that $6 million is built into the increase in the levy during the budgetary process. Conveyance tax, I talked about. On the 150, the town clerk line, the $627,469 variance, we had 3 penalties imposed through the conveyance tax where they violated the 10-year rule on the, what was it called? 490, section 490. And we did not include that in the conveyance tax. We kept it in the NOC, not otherwise classified. It's the penalty as opposed to the actual conveyance tax. It's good for analytically variances, analyzing variances from year to year, and it should stand alone. At the bottom, you could see the plan review services, $361,000. This was an item that was contentious, that went through the RTM, and there was an attempt to have some of that revenue diverted to the Affordable Trust Fund. That failed, but again, that's a very favorable variance, not opposed to last year because it didn't exist, but because we budgeted $500,000. So this is going to show up around $1 million or more. Is that a question or a sneeze?
My pen going on.
The second page, any large variances, CMAC, the negative 518, that's simply congestion mitigation, air quality over on Arch Street. We got some of the funding last year and not this year. Building permits, I talked about the positive variance of $253,000. If I'm going too quick, please stop me. I'll go to the third page on the variances. And education cost sharing in the 620, the Board of Education. ECS comes in 3 payments. It comes at 25%, 25%, and 50%. We simply just didn't get the first payment. Any large variances? Not on that page. Moving on to the 800s, we have storage fees, negative 115. That's just basically timing on when they put the boats away, and that revenue, which comes in around $200,000 each year, should even out by the end of the season.
Can I ask about the Peterson Trust?
You need your mic.
May I ask about the Peterson Trust? It's under library, it's 702.
Oh, you went back.
I went backwards, yeah.
Okay.
That's me.
The question is, why did they go down? Okay, the Peterson Trust is a revenue that's matched with an expenditure in the budget, and it's in this case here, when the expenditures go down, the revenue goes down. It doesn't have any mill rate impact. As far as the reason, I don't know. They probably would have to wait till February. That would be a head count. But it is reciprocating. The expenditures are lower, the revenues are lower. They reimburse us dollar for dollar. That is it for the general fund. I will move to the parking fund. Still, the parking fund has done a turnaround. They're doing well. You could see, again, a lot of these variances in the parking fund are as far as sending out and billing for the parking permits and the timing of when they come back. Witherall, that number's deceiving. That'll be a catch-up, that negative $2,750,000. They don't have 1 month of revenue reported, so that should balance out. And using last year is really not a good barometer of how well or bad they're doing because of the issues they had last year. The golf course continues to do extremely well, and the school lunch continues to do extremely well. I'll come back to them two funds and one more when I do the treasurer's report. And now we are on the expenditure side. And is everybody following on the expenditure side? The only the major variances are, the big one is the employee benefits, and they basically, the employee benefits, the 3.9 is the increase in the ADEC for the pension, the increase in the ADEC for the OPEB, and the increase in the health care. And then in the education, the negative $1,983,000, most of that's attributed to the extra transportation spending. And then you've also had the presentation here tonight with special education. Again, the final one was the transfers, basically, the negative $4,189,000 that's the use of where I'm sorry, question? I'm sorry?
He'll have a question when you're done.
Okay, I was almost done. It was just on the final one on the transfers. That is the money that we pay cash for the capital projects. We just increased it from that number that's in here to a higher number. That's really not a negative variance. And then the only real concern I have here, and Roland and I discussed this, again, Nathaniel Witherall, it's they have through 4 months, they have a negative $1,040,008. It's not good news. I mean, it looks like there's two negatives to this number. Number one is they're going to come before you to ask for more money like they did last year, and because of the spending is not under control. This is the expenditure side, not the revenue side. And the second part of that is it's got a budgetary impact moving forward, is you've got to fund, their budget is going to go up as far as the expenditure side. So Mr. Selps had a question.
Yes, Pete, thank you. I was just asking you to explain the variance on the police force, which was also fairly substantial.
I think basically that was probably, it was last year when they had the safety interims. It's the increase in the safety where they're all assigned to the schools. I've seen them out there. That's a good news variance, even though it's a negative. It's a.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, the ADEC you said went down, or up. In other words, I thought the pension, the pension contribution for the town has gone down under the employee benefit line 901.
This is.
The 53 to 57.
You're talking about the 24-25 contribution.
That's
that
next
went
year.
down.
Yeah.
It went up last year.
This last year was 29.7. It went from 28.2 to 29.7, and this year, next year, it's going down.
Oh, it's next year. Okay, thanks.
That's
It's
the
prospective.
good news is next year, 24-25.
David, you and I won't get to enjoy that, but it'll be. I won't. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Can I get a motion to accept the?
No, you don't
We
usually
don't
vote on
normally do
that.
that. We don't
Oh,
normally do the
okay,
economic report.
perfect. Great report, though. Thank you, Pete. Okay, next item is the treasurer.
Okay, the treasurer's report is, a lot of good news, one negative, and Well, I'll start with the general fund. There's 2 pages here. If you go to the backside, with year-to-date, as reported, the interest income at $3,475,000 is great news for a budget. Conversely, if you move down, and I'm on this backside page where it starts out at the beginning of the year, it's fiscal year-to-date, OPEB is negative $2.6 million, which was reported at the IAC meeting this morning. Other than that, we've got real good news in 3 funds: the parking fund, the golf course, and the school lunch. All had good budget years last year, audit years last year, and their fund balances are doing well. So other than the OPEB fund, everything looks very good on the treasurer's report.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Okay. Leslie Tarkenton, second Miriam Cruiser. Can we accept that with unanimous consent? 12-0-0. Thank you. Okay. We don't have any standing committee reports, liaison reports, or VT special project team reports.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a quick comment on the special project team report?
Of course.
And only because Mr. Drake and I have not come before you, even though we've been very busily working, is that a word, on our Havemeyer building, just to highlight that we are finishing the work as part of that committee, and there will be a report that will suggest that we include next month. Bill or I can do a formal presentation next month if you'd like, or otherwise the report's going to be fairly complete, done by the full committee, and we'll just submit it as part of our next meeting. But that will be done in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, so perhaps if there's a hard copy to include in the packet, and then, leave it open for you to make a, short discussion and see if there's any questions. Does that work?
Happy to, however you want to.
I think that, if
But
that,
I noticed we've never been ticked, and that's because we haven't completed our work, but we're getting there.
so it seems like everyone's on board for that. Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Bill. Okay, we have item 11, new business, approval of alarm registration fees. Leslie Tarkenton.
Yes, Mr. Rick Brooks, the chairman of the Alarm Board of Appeals, came before the Budget Committee requesting an increase in the annual alarm registration fee from $20 to $30. And he stated the fees were not increased since 2009 by the RTM and the BET, and that this increase would be the equivalent of a less than 3% annual increase if you cover the whole period from 2009 to 2024. So that, there was a motion, and that passed unanimously by the 3 persons that were present at that point in the Budget Committee to increase the alarm registration fees from $20 to $30 per year.
And just for my notes.
And that motion carried.
And you made the motion, and who is second?
I'll second.
Okay, Leslie Minority. Thank you. Any discussion?
Can I
Karen?
just, I noticed in the materials provided that he used 4 communities, Rybrook, Portchester, North Castle, and Westport, and they varied from $70 for Rybrook to $10 in Westport. Do we have any idea of what other peer communities are charging for alarms, or was that ever raised?
No, that was the data that was provided to us by the committee. Alarm, or I guess it's a board, excuse me, it's a board.
Laura?
This is a non sequitur, but I find this strange that this comes before the BET when all other fees go before other bodies. So I know it's the charter, but if anyone's keeping a list of things to check on when we do charter revision, this would be one of them.
Mr. Minarski, didn't Alarm Appeals Board, or that used to report to finance?
Yes. When I first started 20 years ago, the clerk who did the registrations and the fines actually worked upstairs in finance, next to where Shara and Elaine Brown sat, and now where we have the water. The first year I was here, the police department approached the previous town administrator, Mr. Gomo, and said that it would make more sense to have this person sitting embedded in the police department because of the questions that come up, the walk-in traffic, et cetera, et cetera. And they actually transferred that person in the operations over to the police department about 18, 19 years ago. If you look at the budget, when you look at the revenue and you look at the registration fees and the fines, they still reside in the finance department's 130 account. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's Pete's little slush fund then. No, we're just joking. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Is there a motion to
I think I made a
approve?
motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Leslie
Are there any
seconded.
objections to accepting that with unanimous consent? Okay, none. So that passes 12-0-0. Okay, next item is Chair's Report, and we'll pass on that given the time. Approval of the meeting minutes. There's 2 minutes. We'll approve them separately. I do have one comment on the special meeting minutes, but I also believe Leslie Mori already had some comments on those. Nisha, I mean, we looked at them. We have no objections to those?
Accepted them.
Okay, so those would, Leslie, your comments would be
I
accepted?
just want to confirm, I don't know if every member has had a chance to look at them. It was just inserting the actual language of the conditions, where they were just referred to by 3 conditions in the prior draft.
Thank you. And so I did not send it around by email, but I would read what I would like to add to the special meeting minutes. And, yeah, okay, so you want to vote on the regular minutes of the 16th? Okay? Yep. Somebody want to move them? Okay, Stephen is moving those
As amended.
as amended.
I'll second.
And then who's seconding?
I'll
Leslie
second.
did.
Leslie Moriarty. Okay, any objections to accepting them as amended unanimously? Okay, that passes 12-0-0. Okay, on the special meeting minutes, in the paragraph before the mention of the first selectman, Fred Camillo, so before that sentence, okay?
Where is that?
So it's the second to last page of your packet. So basically, it's a discussion of ED1, Board of Education. There's 2 paragraphs that go through Mr. Turner's presentation on Central Middle School. But there was, as everyone knows, a good deal of discussion about delays. And I did ask Mr. Turner twice to clarify how, his view on whether delays were caused by the BET. And I think my question was quite specific and his answer was quite specific, so I would like to include that. The wording would be, Mr. Rosesmere asked Mr. Turner if any actions of the BET had caused delays of the CMS project. Mr. Turner stated that to his knowledge, there were no delays caused by the BET. And I believe that's very specific to what was said. So I would like to include that. I'll make that motion. Suggestion?
Second.
Okay. Are there any, can we accept that?
Well,
It's not, go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, two things. First of all, minutes are not intended to be a transcript to capture specific words that were being said. It's to capture the actions of the board, and that is not an action of the board. Secondly, although I raised no issue with it at the time, that's true, I was trying not to create a more contentious meeting than was already extant in that meeting. But I think there were a number of actions of the board, of this board, that resulted in delays. It was done oftentimes not in a direct rejection of a voting of appropriations. It was done in various things, not the least of which was, for example, the meeting at which the item was deemed to be premature and by a process that doesn't exist under Robert's Rules of Order, the matter was put over to a later time. I really think, rather than get into that, I really think that you're down to the point where you want to have transcriptions of points that were made, but not of actions of the board, and I don't think it's appropriate for the minutes, and I won't support that change.
Okay. I think the term contentious is interesting. I'll accept your characterization. I do not necessarily feel it was a contentious meeting, but, I mean, in any case, there are many things in our minutes that do not only describe a specific action, and if we did, our minutes would be probably almost half a page instead of several pages. So I thank you for your thoughts. I do not want to withdraw, my suggestion here, and if we need to take a roll call vote, we can, but I feel strongly it's appropriate, and I would like to continue with it. That's my only edit. Thank you.
Is there a second? Oh, there was a second.
A second.
Yeah. Harry did, yeah. So, do you want a roll call vote?
Just for, I have an addition that I had put in my email that was circulated earlier, too.
And is that,
Do you want me to read that, Leslie? I'm okay with that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Want to take these up separately? Yes.
well, I'm going to assume yours is accepted because there's no I don't think there's, so we're fine with yours. Okay. So I don't really like to take a vote on this, but I respect my colleagues, and if everyone wants to take a vote, then we will.
I think we can do unanimous. Are we okay doing unanimous, or?
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to request a vote.
Okay, so let's do a roll call. Thank you.
Okay, Harry,
Yes.
Laura,
No.
Karen,
Yes.
David,
No.
I'm a yes, Dan,
I'm a yes.
Leslie Tarkington.
I'm a yes.
Leslie Moriarty,
I'm going to abstain.
Jeff Raymer,
No.
Bill Drake,
I'm a yes. Bill?
Miriam Cruiser,
I abstain.
and Stephen,
No.
642.
Okay. So can now we get a motion to?
Can I just have one other addition that again, I'm sorry, I apologize for the late notice, but under the special meeting, under the amend BET policy for remote meeting access by members, I would appreciate if we can just amend this to add the language that was approved by the BET. And I only say that because when I went to look at past minutes to find out when the last policy change was made, I couldn't find the actual language of the policy change. And I think it's important that we document it. So I would just
I would support that.
respectfully ask that we just add and amend and include the language that was amended.
I see everyone's head nodding, so I think that would be a good idea. Thank you for raising that, Karen. Okay,
Under the first page of the special meeting, after the call to order and the amend BET policy, I sent you the language, Pete, if we can just insert it into the minutes.
Yes, I put that in the reference book.
I know, but
and
it just to-
Okay, so you want all of that in the minutes?
No, just what I had sent to you in the email as the amendments, the two amendments? Yeah.
Everything that was in that, that changed to the
email,
reference book?
yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah,
All right.
just so that it's codified somewhere.
thank you. And sorry for that. I know that there's some last-minute comments on the October 24th special committee meeting minutes, but I will make the point. The reason it was critical that we get this on the agenda immediately at our next meeting, or at this meeting, was because, we were informed by the building committee that they needed approved minutes. So we're just working to make sure we don't delay the project. Yeah. So approving these minutes today, although a little painful, was critical to making sure that we gave the building committee everything they needed to do their
So
filing.
I thought the point is we don't use delay, they're called time lapses now.
Time lapse. Okay.
But if Nisha can read the language being added to the minutes as well.
And I would say that because of the delay in this meeting, it represents delay by the BT in getting it all approved.
Okay, of course.
right, that's
Okay,
enough.
so can we accept the minutes as amended with unanimous consent? Yes. Okay.
Well, just confirming that everybody did see the language the sentence that was
That you
being
added it.
added, right, to the section on school safety.
Right.
Okay.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Can we do that by unanimous consent, 12-0-0?
Who was the second?
Which one?
Miriam.
I see, yeah, as amended, yeah. We're adjourned at 9:07.